to debates like anti-blackness and Afro-pessimism, which are utilized to weaponize against black debaters, which disproves Bro's arguments about the way that discussions of natives within the debate space require a kinship towards black debaters. Well, the top of the 2AC articulates the Holocaust as the threshold of trauma, which compares native sovereign laws to this. So this isn't to say that the Holocaust isn't a terrible atrocity, but it shouldn't be used to delegitimize other genocides shot in an 18. The paradigm of Auschwitz functions simultaneously as both a rule and exception, as which all other camps are measured at, as a premier example, which they put in comparison. Auschwitz functions as an exceptionalism. There's a privileging going on, and it got it that serves to reinforce not only the horror of Auschwitz, but also its unique horror, such that it not only confirms the logic of Western biopolitics, but also confirms it to be a better than any historical example for most of the peoples of the globe. This exceptional character of sovereignty is rather the rule, not only where colonialism and imperialism are the veritable standing grounds of European sovereign exceptionalism, the perspective of the colonized colonize it. And I'm going to impact out the bro argument one more time. The refusal to theorize through the lens of genocide results in the re-articulation in terms of Israel as a response to the Holocaust as redress.
Okay. You good?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm kind of curious about how you've articulated why we do not meet your interpretation. The affirmative applies the Indian canons to all deference cases whatsoever, which the only impact to all of your arguments seems to just be we make minor tweaks.
No. You still allow for judicial deference on things that aren't Indian canons.
We apply the Indian canons to all deference cases. Whether that results in a change of deference is a different question that you have not made.
No, it's not, because
it is.
No, because
all of your evidence is just
you're just fucking wrong, dude.
You've not read any evidence that we have to end all deference.
We have.
Where?
Agreed.
Where?
In the area.
The in the area argument is not making an argument about deference. It doesn't even define what deference is.
But you don't either, first off.
Because you didn't make an interpretation of that argument. All right, that's fine.
But your we meet is predicated off of you defining deference in this cross-ex moment, which means that you probably have lost.
This is so silly. All right, the Sean card. Mm-hmm. Where do you think this is about a critique of Agamben's theorization of Holocaust and how he applies that to make an argument about the state? Where do you think the affirmative has done any of that? We have said that the Holocaust was bad, an example of why white subjectivity kind of fucked up. Where do you think we have done any of what Agamben has done?
It talks about the exceptionalization of the Holocaust as a form of genocide.
We said that the Holocaust was bad.
We
haven't exceptionalized it.
You're not letting me finish. The exceptionalization of the Holocaust via Agamben, but also applying to the AF, allows for the comparisons of the Holocaust to colonization.
Where we made that comparison. We have said that the Holocaust is an example of white subjectivity being bad.
Let me pull up your 2AC overview.
Read it to me, please.
I would.
The overview I wrote out.
I know. White subjectivity causes mass genocide. See the Holocaust and the extermination of natives. Our argument is that
we have made two distinct examples of why white subjectivity is bad.
Ahistorical and replicates settler colonialism vis-a-vis the example of Israel. You're just wrong.
All right. The King argument, where does the affirmative describe who is and isn't able to access self-determination?
That's not our argument.
It seems to be your argument because how else do we link to your who is
because
and
it's
isn't
a structural argument about the way the world works. You do not end the relationship between
We do, that's the Hickson evidence and the Wounds evidence
you didn't
answer.
What relationship do you think I was talking about?
The relationship between native bodies and the state. But
no, I wasn't talking about the state.
Keep going.
We're talking about anti-blackness and the way that black natives are explicitly excluded from native self-determination by non-black natives. That's bad.
I need just one second. Did you physically change counterpoint?
No.
Okay, I'll do it. Change stuff for that.
337.
How much prep are y'all at?
337.
Are there any cards?
Yeah, just they're like at the very bottom.
What's the order?
The order is going to be the extra topicality argument, then the counterplan, then the framing page on case, then the wherever you put the whole from evidence, which I think is just the case writ large, and then the K.
Pick case K.
Yeah.
Give me a second here. Okay.
We're good?
Conditionality, you never ask the or dispositional, which means that any defense means we're able to kick the position. So you didn't straight turn any of the arguments, so we are able to kick our positions. We should be able to kick them independently. That's good. See the flexibility positions against vague plan text is also key against us because we don't know which positions will apply till 30 seconds left of the 1AC, which is key to in-depth education. And fairness and topicality always conditionality because it's a precedent to the existence of the debate. In the first place, the argument, not the team counterplan. UTD doesn't solve the absence of defensive argument, so it's dispositional and you can get rid of it. Framing page. Extinction causes psychological violence. You should destroy responsibility for any psyche and individuality. All in the impact here. It's not secularism to have an extinction impact. Your card is about body counts. Our argument is that extinction factor in decision because that makes it impossible to engage in any kind of reform and eliminate state of societies. Our argument is specifically about the ecological damage that is caused by capitalism, which is not a body count versus body count argument, rather an indication about the inherent impossibility of movements in the elimination that occurs. Also, warming independent liquor states they are uniquely in a precarious position proven by their water arguments means ecological devastation independently turns the app, and they would be the first ones to argue, which means that this is uniquely prior and turns all their self-determination arguments. They drop the lead and rover evidence, which indicates that capitalism causes the endless exploitation of the unnative land. It describes reasons, or evidence describes reasons why invasion became possible. That there must be a frontier to exploit exploited underclasses. This existence of this frontier means that the native people will always be subject to forms of genocide and lack self-determination underneath the logic of capitalism, which means if any disadvantage to the permutation, the case doesn't solve itself. Their calls to objectivity are infinitely regressive and also apply to themselves because they have no rubric for analysis. Go to the Holcomb evidence.
Wait. Okay, still.
Yeah. No solvency. They haven't this is a set of case that is ruled ambiguous now on water protections or self-determination. This means that ruling does nothing to solve any of the absent impacts. They drop that this doesn't solve their Fredericks and Heibel evidence because it's about rights-based for protection. The app doesn't ensure rights nor does it grant traditional protection. So things like that will happen to you, which is what their evidence is about. It doesn't say it was ambiguous instead of deference. The Holcomb evidence depends on a Western nationalized Hobbesian version of the state. It assumes that anarchy will be chaotic. This ignores indigenous societies which existed outside of the state for a long time, which means it links to their own paternalism. This is also exactly why their recognition of politics is bad and colonial. And additionally, this court has literally zero warrants as to why there is evidence for anarchy failing. The existence of indigenous societies is evidence as to why anarchy doesn't inherently fail. Go to the critique. You should view the balance of calculation and methodology. The app is a reinvestment into the methodology to say the alternative rejects that. This means that you should prioritize this before weighing the impacts of the affirmative. They have no way to weigh self-determination, which one outweighs the other, which means that their way the app interpretation doesn't do really anything for them. The question of this debate is which methodology we apply to resolve questions of settler colonialism. The link plan is a restriction. Yes, the plan is a restriction on Trump. Our link is not Trumpocentrism, rather it's a link to the logic of challenging the excesses of authority, i.e. the Obama administration and courts have campaigned on any of the imperial presidency, but did not. It was a recourse to legal solution which only renaturalizes authoritarianism because there is inherent drive within civil society for a strongman dictator trying to repress that drive by instituting reformist policies is precisely what leads to what led to the rise of Trump. The second argument is that it legitimizes forms of liberalism, i.e. which is the false premise that
the Obama administration or any other administration would necessarily be better to natives rather than just breaking the same promises that it has with all the treaties in the past, means that their logics of deference will only defer for so long, which turns the case. Second is that Bohm evidence that says that self-determination is co-optable. Even if they win, that they lead to self-determination, they haven't answered this piece of evidence about why self-determination will always be co-opted into the state, because it is a form of liberal individualism. Liberal individualism, as in the natives will be able to decide which kind of product they want, on their reservations, but will not be able to reject the very existence of capitalism itself, and as long as they are constituent within the state itself, which is the alternative. Arguable is a micropolitical calculation, because the debate exists within spatial relationship to capital. Voting after produces hegemonic interpolations of the social order, which is saying capitalist technology to government, which only serves to naturalize capitalism itself. You should vote negative to withdraw your decision from the logic of capital. The Boogaloo Marshall evidence explains that constituent power, whose constituent power is constant interrogation and refusal of the affective, material, and unconscious aspects of capital, which dissolves the power embodied within the capitalist state. Or alternatives of politicization of the social order, which drips through the ideological fabric that maintains capital. There's no warrant as to why we are the eco-societies described in this piece of evidence, which is pretty ridiculous. You should prioritize the scholarship circulated around debate. It's not just about subject formation, but about the ability to liberate political programs. About as a referendum on those programs which filters the debate for you. Scholarship comes first because the unique aspect of this debate, because it interrogates the production of policy in the first place. Fiat is a loser, but you still get the app circulating and validating capitalism, and still the implication of the 1 which means that evaluating the plans still includes evaluating the roles that they evaluate. They read several disadvantages to the alternative, but they're all really one thing. The role linked to the material investment argument, reinvesting in the state of the form of native, from a native perspective, is exactly what settlers were. The Boogaloo Marshall evidence I extended above, so the settlerism is reified via an investment in the state. As long as we always agree that the state is the ultimate power, then the state will always be the ultimate power. Their temporalism argument is a link to the app. They assume a linear progression of development in statehood. Natives aren't in a pre-state position, rather they have their own ways of relating to each other. This is the same form of teleology that justifies the civilization of natives and paternalism itself, which means it turns their own political representation arguments, which make no sense in the first place. No sequencing. There's no way that there's no reason as to why they perceive anti-state politics are given our Boogaloo Marshall evidence, and this means that the permutation cannot possibly make sense, because it's constituent by taking the alternative to attempt to change institutional terms. Combining the specific demands of the state is with our deinstituting gestures impossible. Here's evidence on that distinction. Newman 16, the constituent power to autonomy rather than specific demands of the state. The gesture of alternate spaces, which is the state, the constituent powers proposed in Latin America, in the Middle East, Europe, and North America. Decision action not the distinct or particular policy, but instead refers to the legitimacy of order by which drawing sport, which distinguishes between constituent and institutional power. The former serves the first political order, by the latter, and by sufficient of all orders, the constituent power is trap market a trap, and the permutation, so the link still applies to the permutation. There's no explanation as to why they resolve that. There's no new explanation of the permutation.
What should we have left?
714.
Starting. Yeah, if you like King's Commons.
Yeah, I got it.
Just state debate.
Just.
Fred?
It's still running.
Oh, okay, sorry.
$230. Advantage, framing, T, the K. Let me get my flows in order. If your computer's home.
I'm just.
Anyone not ready? Two conceded internal links to the subpoint one is subpoint one is set by the rulings reincarcerated native genocide. That's some RP evidence indicates that indicates that foreign causes unique forms of psychic and material violence. The second argument is that the natives water is native water's implementation of bad rulings with EPA, etc. The plan is a key way to solve this because it creates amendment to the Clean Water Act, which answers their solvency argument. That's the direct evidence gathering specific about how current statutes against natives are bad. The impacts are one is about utilize that's williams evidence. There's a distinction between there's a distinction between moving forward and not. I'll do that later. The second is genocide. That was explained that would explain above. I'll do the state work first. I know I'm jumping around the state argument. There are two components. Subpoint one is the williams evidence indicates that is the state is uniquely good in the context of moving forward because it's the only way. Anything else just gets co-opted by the settlers in the future. Subpoint two is the Holcomb evidence indicates that acting within the state is uniquely good because it causes because it changes. I'll answer the K portion now. Subpoint one is this argument is silly. Saying native people shouldn't receive self-determination doesn't trade off with the recognition of the intersection of anti-black violence, and this is just a link to the status quo. And you think that the after or the status quo can resolve this it alongside, but giving self-determination is to both is the best hope. The Holocaust argument, this is really silly. The Holocaust was an example of how whiteness operates, and it's not the same thing as saying that it's tantamount to native genocide or explaining all of genocide. Also, it's just and also it's up to Solomon because he's Jewish anyways. They've conceded the more or less argument. They say the state is inevitable, saying the state exists along with the way it does. That's a Hobbes evidence. It's cool. The Hobbes isn't cool. It doesn't change the way that nuclear power or who loves to demonize the leftists and has resources to co-opt every single movement that is tied to that is not going to fuck anyone or that ain't going anyway. Where they aware because we wanted to. It's try or die for engagement because even if it's we get rid of the people in power, we still have capital privilege, and we use things like the military to implement shootas, which is worse for the state. Also, they've answered they've only answered one of the four cards that we got on state inevitable. Rooms, Hexen, and Oliva all indicate that that above, which is framing for the K, which we'll do later. The framing debate. I'll just answer the arguments at the top. First is the link to the Holocaust document that was on the other page there. Any alternative form of native violence fails. Self-determination is uniquely good. That's a word sentence because we have to look forward to the way that things are changed in the future. So also I just said the alternative because it reinscribes the same violence of the settler there. Next argument extinction is white. That's a precedent evidence. Their impacts are based off of eugenics, which is morally wrong. They say the impacts terms the case. That's obviously not true. They conceded the stronger internal link portions of the F, which was explained above, which means they can access case strength T. We meet subpoint one is that we're a prohibition of treaties with the natives. That's a sunscreen evidence. You should prefer it. It's in the context of the affirmative and treaties and is the context of law canons. Gut check. You've considered the Vermeer evidence from the extra T page agency. Restrictions of agencies are restriction on executive power. It means it's game over for their T interpretation because we have framed what a restriction on executive power is, which means even if they went that it's in all the areas, we still meet that. At worst, they would mean we're extra T, but gut check. They didn't extend that that argument. Let us say good. You should prefer at some point one is lit because it's a gold standard for debate. Anything else moots the in-ground education. You should extend the Siegel evidence. It's not answered properly. It's specifically about the government limitations that apply to restrictions. It indicates that Indian law canons would apply to all those things. A topical version of the F do not solve the affirmative because it's not about where the literature is in the direction of, which is what the 2AC argument was. You should default to reasonability. Their counterinterpretation leads to judge intervention. Precision is an benefit because we've read cards in the context of that. Am I missing anything, Solomon?
No, that's fine. Just keep going.
Okay. I'll do the framework stuff at the top of the page. You should weigh the alternative. You should weigh the F versus a competitive alternative. The argument we're going for is that it kills F-ground 1AC. Is the 1AC is a specific instance of why difference is good for the context of natives in the context of in the context of Indian law canons. If we win that is good, you should vote affirmative. They conceded the subpoint B, which is vague outside reason to reject the argument. That's nowhere in the block you get an actual explanation of how the alternative solves things like self-determination or etc. Which obviously kills the 2AC strategies, and you say kills the 2AC strategy because we don't get an on-point answer to the alternative. The K proper permutation do both. The permutation do both. It allows for the 1AC to act as a starting point because we've already done the state good bad debate on the case page, which means that it's only a net offense for us. The net benefit to it is the affirmative because it's uniquely good. The alternative fair subpoint 1 is material investment. The alternative situates a native political strategy outside of the state, allowing settlers to maintain a monopoly on the state powers that crush the current movements to combat racial domination. Subpoint 2 is the temporal representations. The alternative stands with the native as a pre-state era to justify your new colonial patterns on robbing the natives of the political agencies. Subpoint 3 is political representations, which I don't think they answer. The next advocacy of natives adopting anti-state radicalism is what the settler wants by depicting the acts of savages. Subpoint 4 is the intertect, which is a sequencing DA because the intellectual ability of the state is a prerequisite to the state politics. State bad stuff was done on the other page, but I'll do the self-determination stuff here. Calls for self-determination are good. The alternative is that people think that natives are capable with enabling conditions of the worst form of colonialism, like residential schools. Subpoint B is that their first component says native self-determination is a Eurocentric idea of autonomy. The perm as per the rulings evidence indicates that the strategy of the third space becomes a mechanism for which even ideals originating from liberalist ideas because of their downfall and granting natives to define the contours of the political boundaries and exposure inconsistencies with the liberal strategy. The rest of the link cards are not about the app, which means if we win the framework argument, the app is saying that benefit to the permutation.
Yeah, but the other thing is, so. Okay, that's what I'm making sure. So I'm gonna answer that.
If that's what you want to do.
I'm not gonna.
If you're doing RST,
We'll see. Let me think of that. It's fine, those are the ones here. Oh, yeah.
Wait.
The wherever you float the Holocaust stuff, then everyone good?
Hold on, I'm looking for my pen. Framing T.
Yeah, wherever you put the Holocaust stuff.
Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Dan? Cool.
No link to the Rep's argument. Our argument wasn't that the Holocaust wasn't bad, but it just shouldn't be the threshold of genocide. That's and it also doesn't matter because T comes first. Topicality. You can extend our interpretation that in the area means all of the activities. Power means mass is a mass noun, which denotes a homogeneous substance, and the restrict means a direct prohibition. Those are two conceded interpretations, and they don't have an interpretation for you to default to, which means that even if they win that our interpretation is bad, they don't have an offensive justification, which means you can't vote for theirs. Their we meet argument makes no goddamn sense. They didn't even go for the we meet argument from Crossix, which made a little bit more sense, but obviously was still fucking nonsensical. The we meet in the 1AR is that they prohibit the deference on treaties with natives. That's clearly not all judicial deference to all agency interpretations. They haven't explained this or impact this out. They just said it's in the context of this one card that they read that's about barriers, not restrictions, which means you should definitely not allow for it. They also conceded the sandbagging argument from the 2C, which means that you shouldn't allow for a new 2AR explanation in the context of that cross-X amendment because it arbitrarily moves the 2NR, and I don't get a 3NR to respond to it. It's conceded. Don't allow new arguments or unpacking of what the fuck this means because it's just one line. The topic also isn't deference on native treaties. It's all of the area, all judicial deference on all agencies' interpretations of statutes. Not all statutes are native treaties, which means you clearly don't meet our interpretation. I'll read you the plan text. The Supreme Court of the United States should apply the Indian law canons of construction at Chevron Step 2, which 1 doesn't overturn all of Chevron, which proves our arguments because first it's only to Step 2, and 2 it just applies Indian law to Chevron. Doesn't eliminate the ability for deference. The line in the card explains this that it is not that Indian canon should trump Chevron, rather the two principles are both applied, which allows for the extension of Chevron. That's my argument from the 2C about how limitations and regulations allow for an arbitrarily increase of executive power. The extra T cross application. What are you talking about? It just mentions executive power, and the agencies are under the scope of executive power, but doesn't indicate that all executive power is only about agencies. You've also conceded interpretations of restrictions which modifies executive power, as well as the fucking definition of in the area, which gets us out of all of this cross application. It also makes no sense because it's about agencies, not defining what executive power is. And even if they have an interpretation of what executive power is, it doesn't answer all of our offense about why their model of debate is uniquely bad. They say literature is the gold standard of debate. There's not an impact of this or an explanation about why the literature doesn't talk about the things that we say it should. There's clearly discussions about why we should overturn Chevron. There's clearly discussions about why we should overturn Korematsu. Michigan GW, Georgetown BP both read fucking affirmatives that are about overturning broad deference, i.e. overturning Chevron or overturning Chevron, which uniquely accesses all of our offense. If the wiki was up, I could show you a screenshot. They say that it's only on the governmental limitation. This doesn't make any sense in the context of our Muhammad evidence's comparison between limitation and restriction, which indicates that limitation is actually structurally distinct. They say the TVA doesn't solve because the literature isn't in the direction of it. This doesn't have a warrant. That was the over-limiting argument from the 2AC and the 1AR. They just assert that there's no literature about overturning Chevron. This is fucking nonsense and clearly means that you haven't researched any part of the fucking topic. There's not a single articulation of why the literature isn't about this, or it's just an assertion. And clearly there are examples about how there's literature overturning Chevron. They say our competing interpretation results in judge intervention, but they've conceded our argument about how reasonability causes the most amount of judge intervention, because it's not about things that are at least competing interpretations allows for a debate about where the judge should intervene on, i.e. which interpretation you should prefer, but reasonability leaves it entirely up to your arbitrary distinction, understanding of what the topic should be, and we shouldn't make Dan have to think about the debate round anymore, because obviously you don't want to. The precision argument clearly doesn't make any sense, and we've internal linked this because of the 2NC's argument about how it's a race to the top, where we have debates about the best models of debate, which produces the best amount of precision. They've conceded all of these arguments and uniquely internal linked all of their offense, and I am the only one actually sending fucking warrants in this debate. The impact of this is massive. They've conceded that they allow for not only hundreds of apps on the deference topic about individual deference to individual subgroups of people, i.e. natives, i.e. the way that the app does about natives, but also in the context of the trade delegation, where you can do executive power on the hundreds of boxes that our evidence indicates are pieces of paper that constitute executive trade authority, or in the context of no first use to infinite permutations of different countries or different types of nuclear weapons, i.e. we could have an NFU to China, Iran, North Korea, all of which have different solvency advocates and advantages that are easily debated out. The framework for which you view this is that they don't have a counter interpretation to solve any of their offense, which means that even if they win, that our interpretation may be bad, they are not winning a we me argument or a counter interpretation that you can couch a decision on, which means that a debate 101 means that the debate is over and you can submit the ballot now. Am I missing anything, Park? Yeah. There's no offense. There's no warrants for any of their arguments, and their we meet makes no sense in the context of our interpretation of the actual resolution, not in the context of deference to native traits. It's not fucking right.
Okay, we had 245.
You have 230.
Oh, my bad. You're right.
I still wanted to. I mean, like, you could be right. That's what I agree. Right.
You still have 20 seconds.
Time's up.
God, Josh is fucking good.
What's he doing?
He apparently got recorded to concede that blackness wasn't ontological, but queerness was.
I don't know what's going on there.
I'm just like, that's not a good spot for you there, man.
That's a real bad spot for you. And fairness is ontological. He's the judge.
Yeah.
T. Everybody good? Reasonability frames how you evaluate this debate. Topicality should not be evaluated through offense, defense. To impact make reasonability a way better way to judge topicality. But you can't go for next lines when you proceed at predictability internal links. First, the predictability stuff. We shouldn't have to meet the best interpretation of the topic. Just reason was because the best interpretation of the topic is determined on a round basis. The fact that you can vote on T restrict means prohibit, and then T restrict means limitation from one round to the other means that there's an infinite number of interpretations that can exist simultaneously, and the affirmative can't meet all of them simultaneously. It makes being affirmative impossible because the negative has an incentive to pick the worst and most exclusive interpretation impossible, and include the bulk of research and the substance of the literature, which the negative gets to choose the best interpretation as topic and shift it from debate to debate. But the affirmative has to do research for each term, and how else do we choose plans if we can't rely on a stable definition that will research before the debate? It proves competing interpretations, makes being affirmative possible because we can't meet all possible interpretations of the topic, just reasonable ones. Vote to preserve fairness. All else fails. If you think our interpretation was at least reasonable and if the topic at least provides for sufficient negative ground, then this resolves all other questions posed by the 2 and RB substance trade-off. Offense defense approaches to T results in an incentive for the negative stick to pick a set of strategies that are dependent on frequent topic debates to prove their offense crowds out the bulk of research. What we've been doing all year is better to debate affirmatives that are mostly topical than always debate the procedural issue of topicality. That was the resolution was choose and discuss education or to cultivate an advocacy in relation to the topic. Your job should word debates about the topic. If we win this, it means you have to think slightly more. Even if you think slightly more of offense, you should still vote out because offense defense approach make it difficult to be affirmative. It also means that it's not a yes/no question, but there is an interpretation more or less reasonable. The main argument first, the Sunstein argument. The first argument is the Sunstein evidence and describes the canons of delegation, which the Indian law canons are a part of, are a strict barrier to executive, the ability for the executive to determine deference, which meets the entirety of their definition. The fact that the plan text doesn't even have the words nearly all, because the fucking canons are applied to every single deference case and are a prohibition on every single deference case that would trigger the Indian canons proves our fucking argument. Proves our fucking argument that the treaty's argument is incoherent because the Indian law canons are arguments about how when a Congress makes ambiguous laws that affect or implicate native treaties, agencies can then interpret those and make interpretations of congressional ambiguities of questions of ambiguities of laws to then make laws that affect natives, even though there's not a clear intention to actually apply them to natives, which is the whole fucking point of the act. Read the Hall evidence if you don't believe me. The counter interpretation, the single evidence which is extended throughout the debate. It defines restrictions on direct government limitation or use the card specific to determination for restrictions on direct government action. That's the act. They don't have an answer to this interpretation besides an assertion that we can see their interpretation. You should prefer it's from the American Journal of International Law. The reason to refer to the first is over limits. Literature should determine the direction of topic and limits. It's a controlling internal link to limits because regardless of how you feel the topic should play out, the literature determines how the topic is and does plays out. They're constraining to the topic to just overturn Chevron is incoherent with how the vast majority of legal scholars discuss the inner minutiae working of deference. The fact that if you overturn Chevron, the fact that Skidmore doctrine deference or de novo review just overtake it means that you can't overturn the totality of Chevron, but rather you should the literature discusses making and changing agency incentives to how deference is applied, and deference is applied. Also means that there's no topical off overturning Chevron results in Skidmore deference, which proves there's no possible prohibition on deference that could possibly occur, which proves that their interpretation is fucking incoherent as hell. How can you both apply and all of the totality of deference and only apply to fucking Chevron? Other areas of the topic argument. A, the substance stuff, it doesn't link to the plan because we don't even have the words nearly all in the plan because the fucking canons apply to all deference cases, which means that there's no justification for NFU asked to fucking pick one country to create NFU based off of the act doesn't create a precedent or justify other apps or teams reading apps that read NFUs to just one country. The TV argument specifically, the overturn doesn't end deference. That's why no one in the lit discusses that. Discuss that about this all, but rather it's about making minor adjustments to evaluatory framework. All the aspects to describe are the fact that the people reading deference topics are specifying their plan text with things like specific brand X doctrines or minor changes to specific steps of Chevron proves our fucking argument. If you want screenshots, we'll give them to you. I will give them to you.
Do you want to extend the agencies are an executive power?
Agencies are executive power argument, which sort of answers their like prohibition or their substance argument more, because the ability for agencies to interpret laws over natives proves that.
And the F restricts all of
And
those.
the F restricts all of it means that we definitely meet their like fucking prohibition argument.
Debate.
Where you going?
Oh, you good? Give me a second to get something to write on.
Just because it's this or something, I'm gonna back away from my insta votes.
I'm good, whatever.
Alright, how about Meg? I think the large majority of the 2AR is new. I think the 1AR undercovers this argument, and I'm not even sure that the 2AC is like strategically probably the best on this question. I think there needs to be a little bit more time taken in the 2AC to really make sure that you're covering your bases with counter interpretations. And I think that if you are going to go for these sort of subset arguments, you really have to use some of these arguments you're making in the 2AR about how other words check to prevent these exploding limit sort of arguments that are being made. Because like without those arguments, it was just kind of too elementary in comparison to the sort of nuance that was being made on the negative. I think that subsets as per the infinite number of args that would be made would probably be bad for debate as per the list of things. I do think the one thing you gotta be a little bit more cognizant of is the, like, no one models sort of debate sort of question. Like some arguments about how winners get modeled creates a justification for what should be the topic, etc. Just kind of close the door on some of those things. I thought the 2R was better on the the topical sort of examples. Questions?
I have a question
Yeah.
on the 2NC, on the case stuff. Does it make sense? Stuff about the table.
The Holocaust stuff?
No,
Or the
the
case?
bro evidence about.
Not wonderfully.
Okay, real.
know you said some stuff, but, I mean, I wasn't also like super concerned about figuring out what you were saying. Like, I was making sure to like get it,
Right, yeah.
but like, I wasn't like thinking about it.
Okay.
Because I thought the 2 and C was pretty clear about what the 2 and was to do.
Fair.
It was either gonna be cap or it was gonna be T.
Yeah.
Or I guess the counter plan. Right, like,
Great strategy.
I used to coach people to go for that argument.
Really, Monty went for it like multiple times in his career.
I used to judge Monty like it was my goddamn job.
That's funny too.
Any thoughts on the jumped at you?
You need tonal changes.
Okay.
Like, that's a big thing, and I think that you're a little too, like, you need to spend more time creating a story, a narrative that sort of takes place. I thought it was a little, this isn't like a huge criticism, but if you're asking how to get better, I think like, the answer is you need to just stop debating it as much like a politics dissent and more like where you're creating a narrative. You're like, listen, they used X assumption inside of their 1AC. Now this is how that's going to play out in the world of capitalism, X, Y, Z, with like specific exemplars or examples of history that would make it more, right? Concrete examples and like good evidence is always going to be what wins on debates, because like those are the things that the judges can like hang their hat on. Sure. And so more of that, more of like evidence is very clear, A to B,
Yeah.
or like exemplars, applying concepts that they have. We'll get there.